Good morning, y'all. Grab some coffee. I want to dive into the manosphere and how it is impacting modern masculinity. This is a piece that was produced by PBS Newshour, and it kind of dives into why the manosphere is appealing to young men. And I found this interesting because, as you'll see, it's produced by two guys, so at least it has a bit of the male perspective. But I wanted to dive into it and kind of hear what PBS has to say about it.
We turn now to growing concerns around the proliferation of misogyny online and its migration into real-world interactions, especially those involving young men. John Yang has this story about a Detroit teenager's experience and the broader implications of this trend.
Like many his age, Brian Campbell says he grew up an iPad kid, playing a lot of video games.
You about to lose anyway, it don't matter.
And when the COVID pandemic forced schools to shift to remote learning when he was 12, his primary connection with friends was online.
I would spend all my time on the internet. Either I'm playing the video game or on TikTok or both. Fortnite, NBA 2K. If me and my friends get bored playing it for 10 hours, then we scroll on TikTok and send each other videos, and then we get back to playing the game.
Eventually, content with a specific perspective started showing up on Campbell's feeds.
It is so easy to become a top-tier male in the world today because the competition is so ridiculously low.
Topics masqueraded as informational, kind of male improvement. I think a lot of these people have lived more life. They're rich, they're nice car, all that. Like what society says is the ideal for a young man.
So to add a little bit of perspective here, this is happening to women too. So I got on Instagram. I think I downloaded the app onto my iPad. I had an iPod Touch in college. I didn't have a smart iPhone until I think like a year later. But I started I just remember one day laying on the quad, reading a book with some friends and like snapping a couple pictures. And then the following year I was living in the Middle East and I remember snapping a couple pictures there. But I didn't really start taking the app seriously probably until 2014, 2015 when I moved to Washington, D.C. And even then, my relationship with the app was based on the value it had as generating a side hustle or generating supplemental income I could use to help me at that point. Like my career wasn't really, it had just started, but it also wasn't really going where I wanted. I don't know. I got wrapped up in some weird stuff in 2014, 2015. And the career I thought I was going to have didn't come to fruition. And then I was just really disappointed by that. And so I got really deep into the weeds and the financial independence and paying off debt and all that kind of stuff. And so I was really obsessed with building businesses and hustle culture. And I'd always been entrepreneurial as a kid. So in my mind, it was like, okay, this career I had envisioned for myself didn't work out. Maybe I can build something for myself instead. So I started getting deep into Instagram, and similar to this, I was fed content that shaped my own real world interactions. So 2014, 2015, maybe even 2016. So that kind of frame, maybe closer to 2015, 2016. But those years I was on Instagram and I was exposed to the zero waste movement. That was something I became obsessed with. At the time, I believed the climate crisis was this big, giant emergency, and it was up to us as individuals to do something about it. I've always been a big proponent of personal responsibility. So I became that person who was taking to-go containers with me everywhere. I mean, even today, I still drink out of mason jars, but I was, taking mason jars with me places. I was, composting at the farmer's market, shopping at the farmer's market. But I remember watching a young woman named Lauren Singer give a TED Talk where she stuffed all of her, a year's worth of garbage. I think it was in a mason jar this big. This is a 32 ounce. But she stuffed a year's worth of garbage into a mason jar. And I was just enamored by the concept like that. So I became obsessed with the zero waste movement and Instagram as a mechanism to kind of live a zero waste life. And it was after I started a business that attempted to be zero waste and I got really into zero waste, that I realized how much of a scam it was. And I had just been greenwashed and convinced to buy things I didn't need. You know, just to give you one anecdote, I was so obsessed with buying things from the bulk containers at the grocery store. So think oats, rice, lentils, beans. You know, you go to the store and you can pay by the pound. I was obsessed with that. So in DC, there's a store called Mom's Organic Market. And so I would drive from where I lived in Logan Circle. I had a car because I worked in Northern Virginia, so I had to have a car. So I drove my car from my apartment in Logan Circle to Ivy City, which is where the Mom's Organic Market was. So I was expending gas, burning fossil fuels, so I could go buy plastic-free, you know, unpackaged oats and rice and stuff, so I could help solve the climate crisis. Like, there were just so many paradoxes I couldn't wrap my head around. And it wasn't until I actually went to Lauren Singer's store in Brooklyn. I was running the Brooklyn Marathon. This was 2016. I was running the Brooklyn Marathon, and I just happened to be in Brooklyn the same day she was throwing some sort of event at her store, package free. And so I was like, cool, I'll get a ticket and go, because I, you know, really admired her. And so I went, and it was the weirdest thing. Okay, it was weird for someone who doesn't live in Brooklyn, doesn't do the whole New York City thing. It's probably normal for those types of people. But I remember this location, you had to go downstairs. So it wasn't at sidewalk level. You had to go down a bit. And I remember Lauren being at the top of the stairs, like checking people off the list. And it wasn't like, it felt like a party. It felt like like you had to be an A-list celebrity to go there. Like, she wasn't checking off people for the sake of verifying that people had like gotten tickets. It was to make sure only the people she wanted to be there were there, and like tickets were a mechanism of filtering. And I remember going in, and it was like this weird experience. Almost everyone like already knew each other, and I just felt like such a fish out of water. But I remember walking around her store and was like, wow, this is so weird. Like, she had I can't like talk about the items probably without being censored by the YouTube algorithm, but she had biodegradable and disposable toys, if you will. And I just thought to myself, that is so not zero waste. Like, the whole idea of zero waste is to reuse and reduce as much as you can. It's not to spend exorbitant amounts of money buying Instagram worthy, you know, stainless steel containers, or overpriced, you know, organic stuff that you don't need. And it's just like all the stuff she had for sale in her store was like very superfluous. Like, a true zero waster would be someone who rinses out a, you know, spaghetti sauce jar or a jam jar and then reuses that instead of going out to buy brand new things, right? Especially things made in China. And so I remember that, and I remember there was food at this event, and it was served on these plastic, like you would get like a grocery store catering service, like just plastic trays. And I was like, why? Like, this is zero waste, and she's not, like, she has this food on plastic trays. Like, how do you square this circle? And then I decided after a short while, I was like, all right, this isn't my vibe. I'm leaving and going to get dinner. So I left, and as I was standing up on the sidewalk, Lauren was still checking people in, and I'm not from New York City, so I was trying to figure out where like I could go get a bite to eat. And I remember a gaggle of like 5 or 6, you know, frat bros walk by, and they were like, oh, party. And they like beelined to go in, and she just wouldn't let them in. She was making a big stink about it and a big fuss. And it was just so weird to me, because I was like, okay, this is a movement that's supposed to be evangelizing, you know, reducing our consumption and our human footprint. And there's people who you could potentially, I'm not saying they were probably just there for the party aspect, but here's a group of people who maybe you could, you know, bring to your cause. If you truly believed in something, wouldn't you want to convince and expose as many people as possible to your ideas? Like, that's always my kind of notion of it. Like, you're trying to proselytize an idea. And she's like, no, you had to have a ticket. And it just, the way she carried herself at that event, and then me starting to question, like, why am I driving halfway across DC to go buy unpackaged things, and like, why am I doing all this? Like, over time, it just completely unraveled for me. But I shared that example because that is a seemingly benevolent example. It's kind of silly, but that's an example of how I got onto a particular social media platform, was exposed to an idea, and then began living that idea in my day-to-day life. That can apply to anything. It can apply to misogyny. It can apply to misandry, right? So it goes all different directions. So I empathize with what this guy is saying, and how, exposure online and getting stuff fed to you in algorithms. Remember, algorithms make money and make the most money by giving you content that keeps you engaged with the platform. So the more outlandish, the more shocking it is, the more you're going to keep scrolling and stay engaged. So it's all about your eyeballs. It's not about giving you correct information. So if you're getting content like Andrew Tate, of course, like it's going to keep you captivated, and you're going to start calling into question and wondering things. And it's not too different with how I felt with zero waste. And eventually you get into this world where you're no longer just exposed to it online. It becomes part of your day-to-day life. So this is happening. This is one of the reasons why I got off Instagram. I don't use it. I don't use TikTok. There are specific reasons for that. And that's because I personally saw how it was affecting my day-to-day life, my purchasing decisions, my relationships with other people. I mean, hello, would you want to go out with someone who's obsessed with carrying a tote bag full of mason jars, stainless steel containers, and all this reusable crap? No, like, I was a pain in the ass. So, I can totally empathize with how guys might be getting caught up in particular perceptions of reality and content rabbit holes that they might not actually be aware that's what's happening to them. So let's continue.
The message appealed to Campbell, and the more he engaged with it, the more he saw. Campbell had found himself in the heart of what's known as the manosphere. The term broadly refers to online communities that create and share content aimed at men and boys. But there's growing concern about the ideas behind that content. Misogynistic, often conspiratorial beliefs about gender roles and masculinity. And thanks to a handful of key influencers,
Okay, I get the whole Andrew Tate thing. I honestly don't know who some of these other people are. But comparing Andrew Tate to Jordan Peterson, like, Jordan Peterson is just an academic. He's written some books, has some really interesting thoughts and theories, has been critical of the cultural zeitgeist. I wouldn't bucket him in the manosphere. I wouldn't say he is the same as Andrew Tate. In fact, Jordan Peterson doesn't espouse traditional gender roles. He started a company with his daughter. His daughter runs the Peterson Academy, which I've participated in over the last year. It's a great platform. I've learned a lot from it, actually. And his daughter runs it. His daughter's like the CEO and president of it. He helped like build it with her. So a father is building a platform with his daughter about like providing education, like an alternative to college education. Like, that's his vision for it. He's not the same as Andrew Tate, who, my understanding is, Andrew Tate sold like a hustle culture course and was trying to convince, like, hustle culture bros have to convince you of your deficiencies and how they can be position themselves to be the solution for you, because they have a course to sell. And I know this because I've bought in several courses throughout my life trying to like improve, and especially like as I positioned out of working for the government, there's so much I didn't know about blogging and how to make money online and all this kind of stuff. So I had to learn everything from scratch. Some stuff was good. I'm going to be honest, though, a lot of it was garbage. A lot of these courses are just garbage. So to bucket Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson in the same category of manosphere, and a manosphere that is misogynistic in nature, I think this is part of the problem, right? Because you're conflating things together. Same with like people who think Joe Rogan is far right. You're missing the forest for the trees, and then you can't actually explain why the content is appealing to some young men, because you're saying that young men who listen to Jordan Peterson are equal to young men who listen to Andrew Tate. And there might be an overlap, sure, but they're not one and the same. At least I don't think they are.
Manosphere's reach has exploded. In an attempt to quantify that growth, researchers in Dublin set up accounts on multiple social media apps, posing as teenage boys. Last year, they reported that in less than half an hour, every one of the accounts was fed Manosphere content, whether they sought it out or not.
In the post-Me Too movement, we've seen this surge of online misogyny in particular.
Cynthia Miller-Idris is the founder of the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab at American University. Her book, Man Up, The New Misogyny and the Rise of Violent Extremism, will be published in the fall.
They land on an influencer who's offering them often very tangible and real help that makes a difference, right? Like get 8 hours of sleep and drink water and get to the gym. And they package that with scapegoating of women or treatment of women or an idea of success as being, dominant. And so, your life is improving while you're starting to believe this other stuff.
Women's self-purity?
The same thing, like I said, is happening in the opposite direction too. There are female influencers who talk about feminist narratives, feminist perspectives. They talk about, I did a video about man keeping. So this idea that women are bearing the emotional burden of men in relationships. There's there's influencers who talk about the mental load. So how women work more inside the home and they're not compensated for it and they have to balance it. So there are influencers too that are doing, female influencers, they'll create content on TikTok and they'll walk you through how they pack their kids' lunch for the day or their favorite snacks or maybe a home DIY project or how they've organized something. And then all of a sudden they dive into their actual substance, which is, oh, you're an oppressed woman. Your husband is abusing you. You're bearing too much emotional load. You're man keeping. So the same thing is happening both sides. So there's misogynistic messaging that may be happening in the manosphere, but there's also misandry. I don't know what the right term for that is. Misandric messaging that's happening in the women's sphere. So this is happening. And I think the problem I have with this conversation is that it's not being treated as an equal, two sides of the same coin. You only hear conversations about this, that the manosphere is bad, that misogyny is bad, but there isn't an equal and opposite conversation for misandry. In fact, the people who talk about, the mental load and man keeping and all these feminist terms, they're heralded, they're put on a pedestal, they're celebrated. And so I think this is part of the problem is, it's part of this content is being fed to guys. You have to remember the algorithms are in business to generate ad revenue. They're not in business to help you. They're not your therapist. And they're only entertaining you so long as your eyeballs stay on their particular platform, okay? They're not out there to help you. So if a teenage boy signs on, the algorithm is going to feed that kind of content because the algorithm doesn't know any better. But the issue is when these boys are seeing this content, they're mentally primed for it. And then they see what's happening in the real world. They're seeing the same misandry that everyone else is seeing and that it's not being held to account. And so they start believing, whether it's right or wrong, they start believing what the Andrew Tates of the world are telling them because they're seeing with their own eyes how women are being held to a different standard and how women aren't being held to account. And so I think that's an important part of this. It's not necessarily that Andrew Tate is causing the misogyny in the manosphere. It's that Andrew Tate and the proliferation of that kind of content combined with observations in the real world is making men start to question a lot of the things they've been told. And again, if you're, 13, 14, 15 years old and you're hearing this kind of stuff, of course, you're going to be primed for it. And not even just young boys, like I shared with my zero waste story. I was a grown adult. I was a grown adult who could make my own decisions. But when you have social capital on the line and social capital being quantified as followers and likes on social media, you're going to behave in ways that you maybe aren't aware of in the real world because that's just how we're evolutionarily programmed. We look for success. Women look for safety and by being accepted and participating in society. And so if you're not getting that and the way that is being understood in our modern cultures through digital communities, it completely makes sense to me why guys would be buying into this and why women are too.
mental success.
This is seen as a more dominant position.
A woman wants sex more than the guy does.
The average woman will always cheat more than the average man.
That's the sort of content Campbell was seeing. Soon, he was echoing those ideas.
How like women want to control us, and you know, us as young men, we have to not be at the whim of women, and stuff I didn't really know what I was talking about, but it sounded good.
Campbell's dad, Al, and his older brother, Brandon, who had fallen down similar rabbit holes when he was younger, noticed a change.
He started mentioning a lot of things typical of someone who believes that the world is against them, where you think that if you are not, I'll say in quotes, superior, then something's wrong. He was kind of taking on opinions that didn't sound like his own. They were opinions that I myself once had because I had gained them from someone else.
While Brian was seeing this material, were you aware of it?
I guess I didn't really pick up on it at first. But over time, you say a few things, it gets a little concerning, like, hey, my wife's gonna clean up after me. Being the alpha male and the this and the that and the type of guy that's the strongest, the baddest, and everybody needs to bow down and respect you, but then you don't have to respect anybody else.
When it comes to behavior like this, there's really no excuse for it, but there may be an explanation for it.
Psychologist and author Lisa Damore specializes in adolescent development.
It's helpful to think about 12-year-old boys in broader context. Girls hit puberty before boys do. So what this means is that for 7th grade boys in general, the girls are often beating them at recess, and then they come into the classroom and the girls are often beating them in school. So if you are a 12 or 13-year-old boy and you have had a very rough day at school where a girl outran you at recess and then had all the right answers when you didn't understand what was happening in class, and you come home feeling pretty small and you hop online and there is somebody telling you, listen, guys are actually great and the thing that's holding us back are girls, that is pretty compelling.
Jamie, I want you to listen carefully.
So I don't know if you picked up on this, watching this last little bit, but it became really clear to me how important role models are and mentoring is. So you saw the older brother and the dad kind of recognized what was happening and stepped in and provided some, guidance to kind of make sure their son and brother kind of wasn't going too deep into the rabbit hole. And then as you heard that psychologist say, middle school is a particularly brutal period of time where, boys and girls develop differently. And, maybe boys need a little bit more help during that period of time than girls do. Kind of they need stronger role models to come in. And so what I'm also taking away from this is that it's not just that the manosphere and these digital online communities on social media, it's not that young boys are seeking these things out. It's that there's a deficit of role models and support in their lives. If you have a middle school, and you don't have the support you need, you're feeling, held back. You're not beating girls. We didn't have recess in 7th grade, by the way. I don't know who this lady thinks she is. We had gym class, not recess. And, I don't remember if we had gender segregated recess or not, but we had some gender segregation based on different activities. But you have to like maybe this is where the adults in the room need to step up to the plate more. And stop treating kids as equals and help young boys where they need it. I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests young boys have gotten left behind by the school system, whether it's, being put on ADHD medications at a young age so they can sit still, or what, she's talking about here where, they're not keeping up with girls who hit puberty at an earlier rate. And so they're kind of feeling left behind. I think the adults in the room need to step up. So that's parents, that's teachers, that's civic organization leaders. And, things have changed, right? I was in middle school in 2003, 2004. So it's been, 2 decades at this point. And I had good teachers, but I do remember strong male teachers. My 8th grade history teacher, Mr. Shraggy, he's probably one of the reasons why I'm where I'm at today, why I fell in love with history, studied it in college, studied, political science and do these kinds of commentaries because I had a teacher in 8th grade who made me feel smart and made me feel intelligent. My middle school started segregating out the smart kids from the normal kids only in math classes, and I just didn't make the cut. So I was never in those classes in middle school and high school and stuff. I ended up, doing the whole honors route, but in middle school I didn't. And so I was kind of feeling like I didn't know where I belonged. And that was especially true because some of the extracurriculars I was part of, I was with a lot of the smart kids, and I felt like I just didn't belong. Like I wasn't in the same classes as them, or at least, the same math class, but I was in the same social activities as them. So I felt like I didn't belong. And Mr. Schrage was the first teacher I had who made me realize there was something I was naturally talented at, something I genuinely was good at, and encouraged me to continue on that path, and made me aware of the opportunities in high school that I could leverage to continue going down a more social studies, social science route that I honestly didn't know existed. And so I think about like the teaching today, and you're seeing a lot of issues with teachers because it's, again, my observation, there seems to be a lot of female dominated, a lot of female teachers and a lot of female dominance in the classroom, and there seems to be a withdrawal of men from the teaching profession. And I know I benefited, just as a female, I benefited from having male teachers that encouraged me in middle school and high school. So I could only imagine what benefit that would be to teenage boys. And so if the school system is set up to fail them, the school system is set to like contain little boys and not let them be little boys, but then there aren't any male teachers, let alone just in general male role models to help them. I think that is also pushing young boys to this digital manosphere because they don't have anyone to set them on the straight and narrow path. So I don't want to just pin the blame on, the Andrew Tates of the world. Like your day-to-day life is more consequential than what happens online. And I think all of us have a role to play in our communities and our neighborhoods. If you have kids in school and they're schooling, and if you're not participating, you're not active, you're not volunteering, you're not doing anything, we're all also part of the problem. Those of us who are adults, who are aware of this, who have the ability to discern what's good and what's potentially harmful, it's up to us to also step in. And if adults aren't doing this and we're not helping young people and helping them develop, they're going to find alternative sources. And if that alternative source is online, that's where they're going to go.
Online radicalization and the manosphere are at the center of the Emmy-nominated Netflix miniseries Adolescence, the platform's most-watched show in the first half of the year, with 145 million views. It's a fictional account of how these influences lead a teenage boy to murder a female classmate.
It's a call to action by the manosphere. 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. You must trick them because you'll never get them in a normal way.
In real life, there's a growing number of examples of manosphere culture affecting interactions between boys and girls.
It's like little things like, oh, you should be back in the kitchen. And even though it's a joke, some people take it really far.
There are games that I've stopped playing because every single time I joined, I'd receive a rape threat.
Me and my former roommate were chased on campus by 2 different men saying that they were going to have a lot of fun with us that night.
Those kinds of things are...
Okay, I'm going to make another observation here. You can agree or disagree with me. I think there are certain personas, certain ideological personas, and those personas are manifested in certain ways. So, trad wives, for example, have a persona. They usually wear dresses. Most are very modest. They have their hair done up. They're going to engage in activities like baking and that kind of thing. I've noticed, especially feminists and hyper-feminist and very left-leaning people, they usually kind of look the same. So you have a septum piercing, hair that's not a natural hair color, all 3 things that those 3 girls just presented. So I'm not saying that their claims are not unfounded. But what I am saying is that you can sometimes look at someone and deduce what their ideological disposition is, just based on how they present themselves. And so when you look at those things, I don't know. Like, can you believe everything that they're saying? Like, is their interpretation of the things that have happened to them genuine, or is it going through their ideological filter and then coming back as a manosphere threat? So again, one person said, go back to the kitchen, and takes it as a joke, but then, if you take it too seriously, and I think this is part of the problem too, is I'm not saying everything is a joke, but a lot of things are jokes, and boys have different humor than girls. Like, they think things are funny that girls are like, what? And I think, and you see this with comics today too, right? It's like everything is taken so seriously, and whatever levity or joke, even no matter how inappropriate it is, we've lost the ability to discern jokes from like actual reality. So I would suspect if you're 13, 14, 15-year-old boy, you're making a joke and you don't think it's like real, you don't actually intend to enact on it. And then you have girls like this who present in a literal feminist, left-leaning, all men are evil and they're out to get me perspective. They take it literally. And then they do things that ruin your life. So, I think the Me Too movement is a clear example of that. Men have been tried in the court of public opinion, and now they are guilty until proven innocent. And many times that can end careers. And so I think the young boys are experiencing a version of that, but in their own, kind of adolescent realm. They're not experiencing, obviously, job losses, and they're not being arrested for criminal acts based on perceived consent. But I think we don't give enough credit to kids. I think kids are far smarter than we realize. And, they might develop differently and have different developmental stages, but I think maybe we should treat them with a little bit more respect in terms of their intelligence. And I think they've read the room. They kind of see what's happening. And, boys are being little boys in a world where they're told they're not allowed to be little boys anymore. And so I think jokes are taken out of context, and then it kind of, things just get out of control. And it gets back to what I was saying before. You see something in the real world that verifies what you've been hearing in the digital world. And so there's a confirmation bias there. And so it kind of reinforces the veracity of the claims you're being sold on social media. And oftentimes, like I said, those claims aren't actually real. Andrew Tate sells courses, right? So like they're selling something to you, but they need to convince you of a problem in order for you to buy their product. So I think that's how a lot of this can get out of control. There's a technological algorithmic aspect of it, but I think there's an ideological, political, cultural aspect of it as well.
Have migrated from, online worlds into real life, sometimes in ways that boys are just trying to be provocative, sometimes in ways that are really dangerous stepping stones on the way to more harmful and violent content and behaviors.
Experts say the key to combating the spread of these ideas and preventing their worst effects is to engage with young men.
Don't start with a lecture. Start instead with a question. Ask, have you seen this? What is it like to see it? What do you think adults don't know about this that we should probably know? And how can I be helpful?
That's what happened to Brian.
Okay. It's always one-sided. The feedback for this is always one-sided. Yeah, that's true. You can engage with young men that way, but also hold young women accountable. So they show those clips from Adolescence, which was that Netflix show. I watched it because curiosity got the best of me. And one of my biggest gripes with that whole storyline was that we knew nothing about the backstory of the purported victim. We have no idea what she did. The boy in the movie, or the series, was like, she was mean to me and bullied him. And that very well could be the case. Girls are mean. Girls do awful things. And so we had no backstory, no idea what she did, no idea really what led up to that point. And so I think so long as girls aren't being held accountable for their actions, this is going to fall on deaf ears. Girls need to be held accountable because she was, now that I remember correctly, there was like this weird emoji culture or conversation. I guess that's a thing now where like certain color hearts meant certain things. And so the girl that that was the victim in the series had like said things on Instagram and used emojis to convey certain things, and it was bullying. And just like girls and boys hit puberty at different points in time, girls do things to convey interests that are counter logical. They're not rational, right? They'll be mean. They'll tease a boy in order to say that they like them. So if a boy interprets that as bullying, like the girl might be teasing and it's to convey that she likes him. Like that's just how girls and boys interact. So you have to hold girls accountable too. They can't just be blasting their classmates on social media. They can't be sending snaps and then, not being held to account, saying the boys made her do it, and then the boy's life is ruined. Like that's what's happening in reality. So like I said, all this stuff is reinforcing the beliefs and the ideas that are coming out of the manosphere.
And Campbell in Detroit. Around Thanksgiving 2020, his older brother, home from college, sat him down for a long conversation.
So I wanted him to have a more, reflective idea of how he was engaging with others, how he viewed people, and how he interacted with them, less as like ideas or groups of people, but as individuals.
Campbell says that talk helped pull him out of the manosphere. He still sees online videos pushing misogynistic views, but he says he's able to tune them out and click not interested.
A lot of it was like reminding myself about, people in my life, like my grandma, my mom, like remembering that like there are real life women in my life that I respect and love, and that there's more to it than what the internet shows.
This fall, Campbell will be a senior in high school. His summer is filled with internships and other programs. Now, when he hears friends make misogynistic comments, he tries to speak up. What I won't do, he says, is be complicit. For the PBS Newshour, I'm John Yang in Detroit.
Okay, so I think there's some kind of obvious takeaways here. We need more role models in society, regardless, especially at more vulnerable periods in children's lives. The period, adolescence, young adulthood, early teenage years, but then also, your 19, 20, 21-year-old college age years. Like, we just need more role models. We need more adults in the room to step up to the plate and tell kids how it is and help them come to the conclusions, treat them as the intelligent beings that they are, and help them come out of whatever influence they're under and critically analyze the positions that they believe to be true. So we need more role models. We need more boundaries between technology, right? If you turn your cell phone off, if you turn your iPhone off, power it down, it's nothing more than a bunch of metal and some glass, right? It's only powerful so long as you have it powered on. And so if people get off the apps, turn off their phone, put on real boundaries around how they use technology, I think a lot of these problems would go away. Like the young man said, he remembered, my mom, my grandma, like there are women in my life. Like, yeah, I think everyone can do this. Like you can remember, there's this uncle that was really great to me. I shared my story about my 8th grade teacher. You could do this with all sorts of different people in your life. It's that you get wrapped up into the weeds of social media that you forget these people existed in the first place. And so I think you have to reconnect, young boys especially have to reconnect with reality. And I know it's hard. I know it's not easy. Technology has made it difficult. But the Amish have figured out how to make do in the modern world, and I think they're thriving. So gosh, if they can do it, I think the rest of us can too. But we have to be more disciplined about how we engage with technology. And I say the last thing is, be critical of the influencers, be skeptical, like ask what they're trying to get out of this. Like what, if they're producing all of these high, profile or these well-made videos, putting them on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, they're driving Lamborghinis, like do the math, like look and see where where's the wealth coming from to support that kind of lifestyle? Is that lifestyle real? A lot of influencers fake it. You can like rent private jets as a prop to, you know, do a photo shoot. You can rent Lamborghinis to do photo shoots like that. So is it actually their life, or are they selling you an idealized version of a life you think you're supposed to have in order for them to sell you a product? This has been going on forever, for as long as advertising has been going on. I think in the past, it was easier to say no to that kind of stuff. You know, you could turn the TV off. You could close up a magazine. You could, you know, the culture was different. People went outside and played with their friends. Things have obviously changed, right? It's a lot harder to separate yourself and your identity from advertising. But I think, you know, kind of being aware of what's actually at stake here. Like, is Andrew Tate saying all this stuff because he actually believes it, or is he saying all this stuff because he has a product to sell? You know, I think being more discerning about that would be helpful. I would be curious to know what you think of this. I think this was a decent representation of the manosphere, but again, bias. The only quote unquote academics that they interviewed were two women who kind of seemed to me to have a particular perspective on it. And again, I've yet to see any content like this, especially in a mainstream news publication like PBS, holding young women to account. So I would love to see, you know, an equal piece like this about misandry and young girls and Instagram culture and how that is equally as problematic. But I won't hold my breath on that one. But I would be curious to know what you think. If you've interacted with manosphere content and how, like, what your first memory was of it, or how you became engaged with it, and maybe how it's changed your perspective towards women, and what you're doing to set boundaries around your digital life so you don't lose touch with reality. I think that is so important now more than ever before. Thanks for watching. If you found this valuable and you enjoy this commentary, I would love it if you would like, subscribe, and share with anyone who you think might find interest in this as well. All right, I'll see you in the next video.